Hello, everybody. Howdy. It's me. It's episode 76 of The Hidden History of Texas. I'm your host, Hank Wilson, and we've been looking at some of the extreme weather events that have ravaged Texas throughout its history. As always, brought to you by Ashby Navis and Tennyson Digital Media Publishers. Ashby Navis publishes audiobooks, mobile apps, video games. Oh, and we have some great things in the works for the future. Visit ashbynavis.com for more information. That's ashbynavis.com. Oh, and if you don't mind, remember to subscribe to the podcast and tell your friends. I'd really appreciate it. Thanks a bunch. Now, in the last few episodes, I've looked at some of the hurricanes that have taken their toll on Texas and Texans. Well, today I'm going to start looking at another type of disaster that is often as deadly, if not more deadly than hurricanes, but doesn't get quite the headlines, and that's flooding. And we're going to look at two, because when it rains, it really destroys. And we're going to look at two from the past: 1908 Trinity River and 1921 down in San Antonio. Now, what I want you to do is I want you to picture a dry creek bed or a street that looks calm and harmless. Then suddenly, heavy rain falls, sometimes miles away, and all that water rushes downhill at once. In minutes, what was once dry ground can turn into a roaring river. That's a flash flood. Unlike regular floods, which rise slowly over hours or days, a flash flood lives up to its name. It happens fast, often with little or no warning. Walls of water can sweep through canyons, streets, or neighborhoods, carrying debris, cars, even parts of buildings. In some cases, entire homes will be washed away. A flash flood is nature reminding us just how quickly things can change. One moment calm, the next moment a surge of unstoppable water. It's powerful, dangerous, and one of the hardest types of flooding to escape, because it gives so little time to relax. Now, we're going to go back in time, 1908. We know it here in Texas as the Trinity River Flood. Most of y'all will have heard of the city of Dallas. This is where it happened, Dallas-Fort Worth. Stretching from a few miles south of the Red River, which separates Oklahoma and Texas, the Trinity River runs for 710 miles. Now, as the river ran through central Texas, which is where this program is recorded, the Caddo people called the river the Arquicosa, and as it neared the Gulf Coast, it was known as the Decoa. In 1687, French explorer Robert Cavelier de la Salle named the river Riviere des Canoes, River of Canoes. And then in 1680, Spanish explorer Alonso de Leon named it La Santísima Trinidad, the Most Holy Trinity. Now, part of the name, I love this part about history, is in 2022, language preservationists from the Caddo Nation determined that their ancestral language actually lacked the letter R sound. So that means that the original Caddo name, Arquicosa, was likely a corruption or misspelling of the word Akokisa. That word was actually taken from the language of the Atapka people who lived in the woodlands along the Gulf Coast. Just a little bit of history there for you. This is the hidden history of Texas. Now, the river passes through the cities of what are now Dallas and Fort Worth, and is and was a major waterway in the region. Okay, so now you got the picture. River's been here for centuries. Now, about the flood. In the spring of 1908, rain had fallen for days, soaking the earth until it couldn't hold any more. It could hold no more. By late May, the Trinity River was no longer a river. It was a roaring, unchained sea. On the morning of May 24th, the people of Dallas awoke to a sight they would never forget. The river had swallowed nearly a third of the city. Homes in the bottoms, that's always the area nearest the river. Homes in the bottom lay under brown, swirling water. Families scrambled to rooftops with what little they could carry, waiting for boats to come pull them to safety. The wooden bridges that once connected Dallas to Oak Cliff were gone, swept away like twigs. With rail lines drowned in telegraph silence, the city stood alone, an island. It was actually an island cut off from the world. At its height, the Trinity surged more than 50 feet above normal. The flood did take lives, at least a handful. Now, the problem is, records from that time period are scarce, so there may have been many more who lost their lives. We just don't know. We do know that thousands were left homeless, livestock drowned in the fields, businesses were ruined, and the muddy water, it lingered long after the rain had stopped, reminding everyone of the river's power. Yet, out of the wreckage, like with hurricanes and everything else that happens in Texas, came resolve. Dallas leaders saw clearly that the Trinity could not be ignored or left to its own wild course. So, within a few years, levees would rise, they put in levees, the channel was straightened, and a grand new bridge called the Houston Street Viaduct would span the river. A promise that Dallas would never be humbled in the same way again. Now that was in 1908. Well, 13 short years later, South Texas would experience much the same from the San Antonio River and its tributaries. Now, in this area, we call it the 1921 San Antonio Flood. Okay, now this was devastating, and we still have devastating floods here, but this was one of the worst ever. For 23 straight hours, the rain came not from San Antonio skies, but from the hill country where I am. Okay, and water runs downhill, remember that. On September 9th, 1921, torrents fell upstream, and San Antonio, it was unsuspecting, and the city slept as the water gathered strength. By dawn, the San Antonio River and its tributaries were raging walls of water. Streets became rivers. Entire neighborhoods disappeared under the flood, and families clung to treetops or roofs in desperation. 1,000 acres of the city were flooded. A 3/4 square mile area of downtown was covered by anywhere from 2 to 12 feet of water. Floodwaters ripped through the city's predominantly Mexican West Side neighborhoods, killing more than 80 people, many of them in the neighborhoods along San Pedro and Alazan Creeks and their tributaries. Meanwhile, a wall of water crashed into the central business district on the city's north side, wrecking and wreaking considerable damage. The wall of water swept through the streets and tore through structures, including City Hall, police headquarters, and hospitals. The flood inundated downtown with up to 12 feet of water in some areas. Now, to this day, and I've lived in San Antonio, and if you go to San Antonio, you can tell why. If you just look at how the terrain is, you can see why this water would have gone through. There's a lot of hills, okay, and it's very hilly, and there's a lot of dry creek beds. So when the water starts rushing, it will just keep going. And in this case, there were about 500 rescues, many of them by soldiers mobilized from nearby United States Army posts. San Antonio used to be called Military City, USA, because of the amount of military bases around Fort Sam Houston, Lackland, Brooks Army. There's a lot of military, very international city. But more than 200 souls were lost, swept away in what became one of, and is still known as one of Texas's deadliest floods. In the aftermath, the city vowed never again to be caught unprepared. But it took nearly 3 more years for flood prevention plans to be finalized and for $2.8 million in municipal bonds to be approved so work could start. The city hired Samuel F. Crecelius, retired from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, to supervise the overall project. One of those things that was finished and is known as the Olmos Dam. It was finished in 1926. Now, that meant that downtown floodwaters would be diverted into a straight path to avoid the politically sensitive Great Bend, also known as the Horseshoe Bend. Now, floodgates at both ends of the Great Bend would seal it from floodwaters, keep it really out of downtown, the heart of downtown. The bypass channel was completed in 1930. The city's response to the disaster shaped its environmental policies for really the next 50 years, and actually even to this day. But essentially, though, it also carved out new channels of power. Decisions about which communities would be rehabilitated and how thoroughly they were, well, those decisions were made in the political arena, where the Anglo elite largely ignored the interlocking problems of the impoverished West Side that flowed from poor drainage, bad housing, and inadequate sanitation. To this day, San Antonio's West Side and East Side, while not being as ignored as they were then, often goes underserved in favor of services being diverted to the wealthier north side of the city. That's just fact, folks. People get angry. Oh, well, no, that's just reality. So now in the next episode, I'm going to move the calendar up to 1935. It's just a few years after the Great Depression. The world was still recovering. But I tell you what, 1935 proved to be a very wet and disastrous year for many in Texas. We got some more floods that took place then. And I'll talk to you then. You all have a great day. Until I talk to you next time, I'll see you later, guys. Peace.